I cut myself open to keep a woman who was already planning to disappear. My palm rests on the ridge of skin above my right hip. I can feel the thick raised tissue through the fabric of my trousers. The scar is always there. It is a permanent reminder of a season when I thought my body was a currency I could spend. The air in the bank vault smells like cold copper and old paper. It is a heavy smell that clings to the back of my throat. The metal box sits on the table between us. The clerk has left the room and closed the heavy door. It is very quiet in this small, windowless space. The only sound is the hum of the air conditioning. It is a steady, low vibration that makes the fluorescent lights flicker. I can feel the vibration in the soles of my shoes. I can feel it in my teeth. I am 71 years old now. My hands tremble slightly when I reach for the lid of the box. My skin is thin like parchment paper. The veins on the back of my hands are blue and prominent. Inside this box lies a truth I have avoided for 30 years. I am not sure if I want to see what is inside. I am not sure if I want to know why she did it. The lid hinges back with a dry, scraping noise. It sounds like a bone snapping in a quiet room. A silver monogrammed flask sits on top of a stack of manila folders. The silver is tarnished to a dark, bruised purple. It looks like a storm cloud captured in metal. The initials EB are engraved in a flowing script that looks like a tangled vine. This was the first thing I ever saw of her family. It was a cold object in a hot city. 1994 was a year of heavy heat in Savannah. The air was thick with the scent of boiled peanuts and damp pine needles. You could feel the humidity like a wet blanket on your skin. The moisture stayed in the air even after the sun went down. You could hear the cicadas screaming in the live oaks from noon until dusk. It was a constant, high-pitched ringing that never seemed to stop. I was 41 years old then. I felt like I was in the prime of my life. I owned a 1968 Mustang with a candy apple red paint job. The car was my pride and joy. I spent my Saturdays buffing the chrome until I could see my own reflection in the bumper. I liked the way the engine roared when I turned the key. It felt like power. It felt like I could go anywhere I wanted. I drove that car through the squares of Savannah just to feel the wind. I was a man who believed in the beauty of things he could touch. I met Meredith at a gallery opening on Broughton Street. The room was crowded and smelled of cheap wine and expensive perfume. She stood near a painting of the marsh. She wore a dress the color of a bruised plum. The silk looked soft and cool against her skin. She was the most beautiful thing in the room. She spent the entire evening holding her phone up to the ceiling. She was checking the signal every 5 minutes. Her eyes were constantly darting toward the small screen. I thought she was waiting for a business call. I thought she was an important woman with many responsibilities. She looked at me and smiled. She told me her father was very ill. Her voice was soft and had a slight tremor in it. She said his kidneys were failing. She said he was waiting for a miracle. I wanted to be that miracle for her. I wanted to be the man who saved her world. We spent our first 6 months together in a blur of Spanish moss and slow drives along the coast. We would drive out to Tybee Island and watch the waves. I loved the waves. I loved the way she looked in the passenger seat of my Mustang. Her hair would blow in the wind and she would laugh. She would rest her hand on the dashboard and watch the pine trees blur past. I believed I had found the person I would grow old with. I thought about our future every time I looked at her. I imagined us sitting on a porch in rocking chairs. I believed that by giving her father a piece of my body, I was earning a seat. I wanted a permanent seat at their family table. I wanted to belong to someone. That was the person I thought I knew. I thought I was being a hero. I thought I was proving my worth through sacrifice. I did not realize that I was just a part of a larger machine. I was a gear being turned by hands I could not see. I should have seen it then. We were sitting on a bench in Forsyth Park. The fountain was splashing behind us. The water looked white and frothy in the sunlight. A group of tourists was laughing nearby. They were taking pictures of the flowers. Meredith took the silver flask from her purse. She handed it to her father, Elias. He was sitting in a wheelchair next to the bench. He was a large man with hands like granite blocks. His fingers were thick and scarred. His skin had turned a pale, sickly yellow. The color of his skin made me feel a deep sense of pity. I wanted to fix him. He took a sip of water from the flask and wiped his mouth. He looked at me with eyes that seemed to see right through my skin. They were cold, gray eyes. They did not have any warmth in them. He did not say thank you. He did not acknowledge my presence with a smile. He just gripped the silver flask until his knuckles turned white. He looked like he was holding on to the only thing he had left. Meredith was checking her phone again. She looked anxious. She walked 20 paces away to get a better signal. She left me alone with a man I barely knew. The silence between us was heavy. Elias leaned toward me. His breath smelled like metal and sour medicine. It was the smell of a body that was failing from the inside out. He told me that life is a series of transactions. His voice was a low growl. He said that some debts can never be repaid in cash. I did not understand what he meant at the time. I thought he was talking about the value of life. I thought he was being philosophical. I told him I didn't want his money. I said it with pride in my voice. I told him I loved his daughter. I told him I would do anything to keep their family whole. I thought my words were noble. I thought I was showing him the strength of my character. I did not see the way his fingers tightened around that silver flask. I did not notice the flash of something dark in his eyes. It was not gratitude. It was something closer to contempt. He looked at me like I was a fool. I was a fool who was offering a gift he did not deserve. The surgery took place in November. The morning was crisp and the sky was a pale blue. The hospital smelled of floor wax and burnt coffee. It is a smell that I can still recall perfectly today. It makes my stomach turn. The hallway was always cold. I remember the sound of the gurney wheels clicking over the linoleum. Click, click, click. It was a rhythmic sound that felt like a countdown. I lay on the thin mattress and watched the ceiling lights pass by. I felt small and vulnerable. I remember the taste of the anesthetic as it entered my veins. It was like drinking liquid ice. The cold spread from my arm to my chest. It felt like my blood was turning into slush. Then the world went black. There was no light and no sound. When I woke up, the pain was a dull roar in my side. It felt like someone had driven a hot iron into my hip. I tried to move, but my body would not obey. I was in a recovery room with 4 other men. The air was thin and dry. I could hear the sound of machines beeping. I looked for Meredith. My eyes were blurry from the drugs. I finally saw her standing by the window. She was not looking at me. She was looking at the small screen of her phone. She was lit from behind by the gray light of the afternoon. I reached out my hand toward her. I wanted her to touch my fingers. I wanted her to tell me that I had done a good thing. I wanted to hear her voice. She did not move from the window. She did not even look in my direction. She just stood there in the silence. She was checking the signal. Her thumb moved over the buttons in a frantic motion. I felt a cold knot of dread in my stomach. Something was wrong. I could feel it in the air. She stayed for 20 minutes. She spoke to the nurse about the dosage of my pain medication. Her voice was flat and professional. She did not sound like the woman who had laughed in my Mustang. She told me she had to go home to check on her father. She said he was doing well. She said his new kidney was functioning perfectly, my kidney. She said the doctors were very happy with his progress. She kissed my forehead. Her lips were cold. She smelled like peppermint and nothing else. There was no trace of the perfume she usually wore. She walked out of the room without looking back. I listened to the sound of her heels clicking on the hard floor. The sound got softer and softer until the silence swallowed it up. I spent the next 3 days alone. The nurses were kind, but they were busy with other patients. They changed my bandages and brought me cups of water. I watched the television without the sound on. The moving images meant nothing to me. I rubbed my palm over the bandages on my side. I tried to imagine the wedding. I thought about the church we had picked out on Bull Street. I thought about the flowers and the music. I thought about the house we were going to buy. I used those thoughts to drown out the pain. The wedding was scheduled for January. We had already sent out the invitations to our friends. My tuxedo was hanging in the closet of our shared apartment. I could see it in my mind. It was a black suit with a crisp white shirt. Meredith had picked out a dress with lace sleeves and a long train. She had shown me a picture of it in a magazine. She looked so happy when she talked about it. Everything was in place. The cake was ordered. The photographer was booked. I went home on a rainy Tuesday. The sky was the color of lead. The apartment was quiet. The air smelled like stale lilies. It was a funeral smell. Meredith was not there. There was a note on the kitchen table. It was written on a piece of plain white paper. It said she was staying with her father to help him through his recovery. It said she would be back in a few days. She told me to rest. I sat on the sofa and watched the rain hit the window. I was still weak and my side ached whenever I moved. I tried to call her. I just wanted to hear her voice. I wanted to know she was safe. The phone rang and rang. I called her every hour. I called until my fingers were tired. Eventually, a recording told me the number was no longer in service. The mechanical voice was cold and final. I felt a chill run down my spine. I drove to her father's house on the edge of the city. The Mustang felt heavy and slow in the rain. My side throbbed with every bump in the road. I had to grit my teeth to keep from crying out. The house was a large Victorian with a wraparound porch. The windows were dark. The gravel driveway was empty. There were no lights in the garden. It looked like a tomb. I got out of the car and walked to the front door. I knocked on the front door for 10 minutes. I hammered my fist against the wood until my hand was sore. No one answered. The house felt hollow. I walked around to the back of the house. I saw the silver flask sitting on a glass table on the patio. It was empty. It had been left out in the rain. I picked it up and put it in my pocket. The metal was freezing cold. It felt like a piece of lead in my trousers. I went back to our apartment. I walked into the bedroom. The closet door was open. All of her clothes were gone. The hangers were swaying slightly in the draft from the window. The space where her suitcases had been was a clean square on the floor. There was no dust there. She had taken everything. She had even taken the small jewelry box I gave her. She had erased herself from the room. I sat on the edge of the bed. I did not cry. I was too tired to cry. I just sat there and rubbed my side. I looked at the wedding invitations stacked on the dresser. They looked like tiny white gravestones. I looked at the photo of us at the beach. She was smiling in the photo. She looked beautiful, but I noticed something I had missed before. She was holding her phone in her left hand. Even then, she was looking for a signal. I checked my social media. I was blocked. I called her friends. No one answered the phone. I called her workplace. They told me she had resigned 2 weeks prior. She had disappeared into the humid Savannah air. She had taken her father and my kidney with her. I was left with a scar and a silver flask. I was left with a tuxedo that would never be worn. I was left with a silence that lasted for 30 years. I sold the Mustang 3 months later. I needed the money for the medical bills. I couldn't afford to keep it anymore. The new owner was a young man from Atlanta. He didn't even look at the engine. He just liked the color. I watched him drive away down the street. The red paint looked like a drop of blood against the gray pavement. I felt like I was watching my own life disappear. I felt empty. I lived in a state of quiet shock for years. I worked my job at the archives. I spent my days surrounded by old paper and dust. I liked the silence of the library. It matched the silence in my chest. I ate my meals alone at a small table. I grew used to the dull ache in my back during the winter months. The scar would tighten when the temperature dropped. I stopped dating. I didn't want to let anyone else close to me. I stopped believing in the idea of a permanent seat at any table. I told myself that life was indeed a series of transactions. Elias was right about that. I had paid a high price for a lesson I didn't want to learn. I carried that lesson with me every day. I believed she had used me. I believed the entire relationship was a long con. I thought she had scouted for a donor. She found a lonely man with a red car and a kind heart. I thought I was a mark. I carried that bitterness like a stone in my pocket for 3 decades. It grew heavy over time. It shaped the way I looked at the world. It made me a cold man. I didn't trust anyone. Then, 3 weeks ago, a lawyer contacted me. He called me at the archives. His voice was dry and formal. He told me that Elias had passed away. He said there was a safe deposit box in my name. He said it had been sitting in this vault since 1996. He gave me the address of the bank. I didn't want to come. I wanted to leave the past in the ground, but the curiosity was too strong. Now I am looking at the contents. Below the tarnished flask is a thick envelope. It is heavy. I pull it out of the box. Inside the envelope are several private investigator reports. They are dated from the month after my surgery. I read the first page. The paper is yellowed and brittle. It smells like old cloves. The report details the business dealings of Elias. He was not a retired businessman. He was a career criminal. He specialized in moving stolen goods through the port of Savannah. He dealt in things that were better left unmentioned. He was a man with many enemies. He was a man with no friends. The report says that Elias had a plan. He was going to use me. After the transplant, he intended to have me eliminated. He didn't want a witness to his weakness. He didn't want anyone to have a claim on his life. He felt the moral debt of the kidney was a threat to his authority. He couldn't live with the fact that he owed a common man. He wanted to wipe the debt clean. He wanted to kill me. I turn to the next page. There is a handwritten note from Meredith. The ink is faded. It is a blue ink that has turned gray. The handwriting is jagged and hurried. It looks like it was written on a moving train. She wrote that she found out what her father was planning. She overheard a conversation in the study. She wrote that she knew he would never let me live if she stayed. She said he viewed me as a liability. She said he was a monster. She wrote that the only way to save my life was to take him away. She had to disappear with him. She had to keep him moving. She had to keep his attention on her. She traded her life for mine. She ghosted our wedding to keep me from a grave in the marsh. She knew he would find me if she stayed. She stayed with that monster for 30 years. She did it to ensure he never came back for the rest of me. She lived in fear so I could live in peace. The last document in the folder is a death certificate. Elias died in a nursing home in Oregon. He died of heart failure. He outlived his new kidney by only a few years. He died alone in a room that smelled of bleach. I pick up the silver flask. It feels heavy in my hand. I think about the way she used to check her phone every 5 minutes. I realize now she wasn't looking for a signal. She wasn't waiting for a call from a friend. She was looking for a warning. She was watching for the men her father sent to follow us. She was looking for the shadows in the corner of the room. She was guarding me. She was a soldier in a war I didn't even know was happening. I leave the bank. The sun is bright and the air is hot. It is the same Savannah heat I remember from 1994. It feels like time hasn't moved at all. I walk toward the park. I sit on the same bench where we sat 30 years ago. The fountain is still splashing. The water is still white and frothy. I rub the scar on my side. The pain is the same. The heat is the same. I look at the silver flask. I see the monogram EB. I think about the life I lived while she was hiding in the shadows. I think about the archives. I think about the red Mustang. I think about the lace sleeves of a dress that was never worn. She never got to be a bride. She only got to be a keeper of a dying man. She gave up her world to keep mine spinning. I am a 71-year-old man with one kidney. I am a man who was saved by a woman I spent 30 years hating. I carried anger where I should have carried gratitude. I was wrong about everything. I have no way to find her now. I have no way to say thank you. The debt has finally been paid. It was paid in years of silence. It was paid in the dark. It was paid in the distance between Savannah and Oregon. I stand up and walk toward the fountain. My legs feel heavy, but my heart feels light. I reach the edge of the stone basin. I can feel the mist from the water on my face. It is cool and refreshing. I drop the silver flask into the deep water. I watch it sink. It disappears beneath the bubbles. It rests on the bottom with the pennies and the wishes. I turn around and walk away into the heat.